Our very own Phil Perry is at the NFL Combine in Indy and caught up with Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports Philly, who had this to say about A.J. Brown.
If the player's not happy, then you might have to move him, and I think there's a lot of teams that would be vying for his services.
How much would it cost? If the Patriots end up calling Philly this offseason and it's, Mike Vrabel's calling Howie Roseman, and he says, what do you need for A.J. Brown? What do you think the answer would be?
Yeah, I think, especially with the Patriots, you look at that 31st pick. And I don't think that's a crazy price. I know that's a high price for a player. And you might be thinking, well, the Eagles don't really have any leverage if people know the player's frustrated. But I also think there are other teams that could get in that mix. And maybe a second-round pick would do it. I don't think the Patriots' second-round pick would do it. There's a really big difference between high in the second round and then late in that second round. So, yeah, I think 31 would have to be on the table if it comes to New England.
All right, let's bring in our guy, Phil Perry, who's live in the action from Indianapolis. And Phil, what do you make of your friend's comments or Dave's comments in terms of what the Patriots may be able to get for A.J. Brown? Is it enough?
I think, listen, if the Eagles are dying to have a first-round pick for A.J. Brown before they would consider moving him, that to me would be too rich, quite frankly, for a guy who's still making a lot of money in A.J. Brown, who could still be the guy he was physically, but I think he looks a step slow. Now, Kayla, if he's in a better situation with a coach that he really likes, with a quarterback that he considers one of the best in the league and maybe better than the one that he's working with right now in Philadelphia and Jalen Hurts, maybe you see a different player on the field. Maybe you see a more motivated player. Maybe you see that burst come back for A.J. Brown. But the way he's looked, even though he has been productive when things are going well there in Philly, a first-round pick for A.J. Brown to me right now is too rich. And the timing of this is interesting too, because Dave mentioned this in a different portion of our conversation. But if they decide to trade him before June 1st, the dead money cap hit is almost untenable. It's over $40 million for Philadelphia. If they trade him after June 1st, the number is much more manageable. The problem is, by the time June 1st rolls around, the team building portion of the calendar is through. And so the Patriots will have, you would think, have already built up their receiver room. They will have spent already a lot of their money, you would think. So there are some interesting machinations here involved with an A.J. Brown trade if one is going to occur.
Yeah, I want to keep this receiver talk going because you do see the Patriots with the release of Antonio Gibson just freeing up a little bit of cap space right now and making some moves. I want to switch gears to a guy that we did just mention, and that is Mike Evans, who we talked about has had 11 consecutive seasons up until last year due to injuries where he has had 1,000+ receiving yards. He's a baller. He knows what it takes to get to winning ways, playing with Brady. Do you see a fit with Mike Evans and the Patriots?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he ends up getting on the open market. He's technically under contract still with the Bucs, but he's got a bunch of void years on that deal, and he has made it very clear that he wants to play. And good for him. He should. He'll be paid somewhere. I don't know if it'll be in New England, because I think you're probably looking at something like, after talking to some people this week in Indianapolis, Kayla, a one-year deal that might be worth around $20 million. And so is that a move that the Patriots would want to make? Are they viewing themselves as this team that is ready to be right back in the Super Bowl mix? Because if they are, and they feel like they should be there, then maybe you do look at a move like this for Mike Evans to just give your offense that kind of jolt for one season. But if you still see yourselves as in the middle of a rebuild, you might want something a little bit more long-term. I also find the construction of their receiver room really interesting right now, because they do have Kayshon Boutte. They do have a guy they spent a third-round pick on last year in Kyle Williams. These guys are ex-receivers, Kayla. They are not interior players, and that's what Mike Evans is. So if you bring Mike Evans in, are you suddenly saying to Kayshon Boutte or Kyle Williams, see you later? And maybe you would be. Maybe you'd be okay with that because Mike Evans is Mike Evans. But I just wonder if the Patriots feel like they're where I think some Patriots fans might feel like they are, which is, hey, let's try to get back to the Super Bowl. I don't know. Listen, I'm sure, of course, the Patriots would hope to do that, and they view themselves as a competitive team. But is that kind of move for a veteran player like that on a one-year expensive contract the kind of move that they want to make right now in their build?
Yeah, and you also have to factor in Steph Diggs is still in-house too. So all those receivers, whether it's Kayshon Boutte, whether it's, you still got Pop Douglas, you still have the rest of these guys that they haven't made moves on, but obviously wanting to keep an eye on some of those big gets like a Mike Evans. So we'll keep note there. Phil, I want to ask you, what are people asking you specifically? What's the talk at the Combine, maybe defensively?
Yeah, offensively, actually, it's Stephon Diggs. We'll see if he's with the Patriots in 2026 and moving forward. But defensively, it's Christian Barmore. And I found this interesting, Kayla. I've had people come to me and ask me, these are industry sources, saying, you know, what do you think the team is going to do with Christian Barmore? Because they feel like there is a decision there to be made on Barmore. Now, he is due, you know, somewhere in the range of $10 million guaranteed as soon as the league year starts, essentially, and that would be guaranteed for injury, according to Over the Cap. And so if that's the case, this decision has to be coming relatively quickly for the Patriots. And they already have a significant investment in someone at that position in Milton Williams. And if they want to start to reallocate some of their money for 2026 and beyond to some different spots, maybe to the edge, if you're talking about the defense, then do you want to continue to invest in Christian Barmore? Now, it would not be a significant move in terms of cap savings if they were to release him or try to trade him. But, you know, really the more important number, Kayla, is cash. And so, you know, what are they spending in terms of their cash? They spent a lot of cash last offseason, obviously, in free agency. If they're looking at people around the league, whether it's a Mike Evans or somebody else, maybe it's somebody via trade, somebody who's going to require a lot of cash for 2026, is somebody like Christian Barmore, somebody you'd be willing to move on from, even though in terms of your cap situation, it's not necessarily going to free up all kinds of space.
Yeah, because you may be able to save about roughly $11.5 million by freeing up Barmore towards the cap, but you just mentioned it, the cash is something that the Pats Kraft is keeping an eye on. But one guy who is not cheap, Maxx Crosby, what are you making of this progress, if there is any at all, and maybe a fit in Crosby with the Patriots, if that were to be a thing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, it sort of gets back to that conversation we were having earlier about Mike Evans. Where are you in your team build? If you're a team that feels like it should be going all in, quote unquote, to get back to the Super Bowl, then you'd consider it if you're New England, and maybe they will. You know, I think in terms of his play style and what kind of teammate he is, by all accounts, out in Vegas, this is the kind of person that the Patriots would really like to bring into their locker room. And Mike Vrabel and Maxx Crosby have talked in the past about, you know, how they've met at a Pro Bowl and they really hit it off. And in terms of his visual brand, this is something that I've been told, you know, this is what the Patriots are looking for, whether it's in free agency or the draft. You've got to have a certain visual brand. What does it look like when your film is on the screen? What jumps out at Patriots evaluators? They care about that stuff, and he brings that to the table as well. You're also talking about a $30 million base salary, Kayla, and the kind of trade compensation that might be not just that 31st overall pick, but also maybe a second-round pick if you're looking at the Quinnen Williams trade for the Cowboys as a comp. That is a steep, steep price to pay for a player at the stage of his career that Crosby is at.